Hi, thank you for watching. Today I would like to show you another one of his earlier paintings. It's also in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and it's called the Church Tower.
Now this is the painting in full. It is one of the paintings that Vincent made in his Dutch years, one of his earlier paintings, so it's still very dark and very simple in colors. What you actually see on this painting is the tower, or what's left of it, the tower of the church that Vincent could see from the garden behind the house where he was living at that time.
Now this painting, it was painted in 1885 and by that time Vincent was living with his parents again after he lived 2 years on his own. Um, well, he had a difficult relationship with his father. They had many arguments, mainly about religion, but also about he wasn't doing anything with his life. He was not successful. The way he dressed and the way he was living. But Vincent didn't like it anymore in the north, and mainly because of a lack of money, he decided to go back to his parents' place for a while. He stayed there for 2 years, and at that time, his father was a minister. He was a Protestant priest in a village, in a small village in the south of the Netherlands, and they were living in the rectory. This is a painting of that house they were living. The whole family lived there for 3 years. Vincent actually for 2 years. The house is still there. It's in a very good condition. This is what it looks now. Now, when Vincent's parents moved to Nuenen, Vincent was still living in The Hague. And so he never saw that house before he got there in 1885. So he only knew the house from letters, the letters that he got from his parents and from his brother or his sisters. And even before he arrived in that house, in that rectory, he always had in mind making drawings and paintings of that view from the garden with that church tower in the background.
And so he did. Here you can find a selection. So he made drawings of the garden, the tower. This is a nice image of what the garden looked like, the whole garden, and with the tower at the background. This one is in the Krullenmuller Museum in the Netherlands. This one is in Zurich. When Vincent arrived in that village, the church was already gone, but the tower was still there. The church was from the 1400s, and it was more or less a kilometer away from the house. And Vincent painted the tower in different conditions, different stages. On these paintings, the tower is still complete, but on our painting, the top was already gone. And in the 1500s, the village was built around that church, but during the following centuries, the village moved more to the west, so the location of the church was outside that village, in between the fields. And around the church was the cemetery. You can still see the crosses. And when Vincent was living there, the cemetery was still in use.
And he really loved that idea that the farmers were buried in the soil that they've always worked with during their life. There's actually a letter number 507, and a letter from Vincent to his brother Theo, and there he describes this painting. He writes about this idea, and I will read a short part of that out loud for you.
I wanted to say how this ruin shows that for centuries the peasants have been laid to rest there in the very fields that they grubbed up in life. I wanted to say how perfectly simply death and burial happen, coolly as the falling of an autumn leaf, no more than a bit of earth turned over, a little wooden cross. And now this ruin says to me how a faith and religion mouldered away, although it was solidly founded, How, though, the life and death of the peasants is and will always be the same, springing up and withering regularly like the grass and the flowers that grow there in the churchyard.
Now, interesting is that the Vincent van Gogh Museum calls this painting the church tower in Nuenen. But Vincent, in his letters, he called this painting the peasant's cemetery. Vincent was always extremely interested in peasants, in the peasant's life throughout his career, but mainly in his earlier career, in his Dutch period. He painted many farmers, farmers' houses, farmers' families, potato eaters, birds' nests, farmers' tools. He he really called himself a farmer's painter, painter of the farmers.
But he was also very interested in the transience of life, the fleeting nature of life. As his subjects, he always preferred old things, old people, old farmers, people who had a tough life, and old and dilapidated houses, ruins, old tools, farmers' tools, and flowers already spent. Even in his portraits, these were always old people, farmers, dirty people, workers, miners, prostitutes. He never painted the elite, he never painted the decent higher class people. He was just not interested in them. When he was living in Paris, they were building the Eiffel Tower there and those impressive boulevards by Haussmann. Vincent was just not interested, even not in his letters. He preferred going out of the city and paint the countryside, and the windmills and the huts in the fields of Montmartre.
Vincent preferred objects that stood the test of time and people who had a tough life. Those people have a story to tell that interested Vincent. Same as he painted trees or houses. Vincent painted all trees and houses and huts and church towers. He painted them the same as he painted his portraits, as he painted people, with a personality, with a character. Don't paint things as they look like, as they are in reality, but paint them how you feel them. Now, the fact that Vincent chose these kind of subjects was probably a reason that he was not very successful in his work, well, not commercially wise, as we all know. In those days, in the late 1800s, people didn't see much posters, images, pictures, magazines, and the pictures or the posters that they did see, they were mainly about modern things, new things, the new buildings in Paris, or new inventions, or the modern dresses that the expensive ladies in Paris are wearing at that time. So to come up then with a painting of a dilapidated church tower, or a farmer's family eating potatoes, that people thought that was weird. Why would you do that? Why would you waste paint on that? Who wants that hanging on their wall in their living room?
But Vincent was really satisfied with the result, the church tower. That is also why he signed it. He only signed his pieces when he was really happy with it, with the result. And together with the potato eaters and the painting of the hut, he saw these three paintings as his first adult pieces. And he really presented himself with these three paintings as a painter of the peasant life. And his style was basic. Their life was dark, their life was ugly and tough, so the paintings are dark and tough. And don't try to make it any nicer than reality is.
With these three paintings, he was really hoping for some sort of a breakthrough. He was hoping for recognition in the art business, in the art industry. But we all know how that ended, in a big disappointment.
Nowadays, the church and the tower are completely gone, of course, but as some sort of a monument, they indicated where the church used to be, so you can visit that. So the church is gone, but part of the cemetery is still there. And this is where Vincent's father was buried. He died in 1885, on Vincent's birthday actually, when Vincent was living in that house. And that the fact that he's buried there is really cool, because Vincent's father, during his life, he was always very committed to keep that cemetery and not to remove it as they did with the church. So now, almost 140 years later, his grave is still there. It's actually just been renovated.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the video about the church tower. Don't forget to like it, please. And if you want to know more about his Dutch period, then a good advice would be to watch my video about the painting called Leaving the Reformed Church. It's a beautiful painting, very interesting story. Bye.